Meanwhile, on the comic box, everybody wants to be the guy in the chair. Kick it, Ryan.
What does that mean?
Ba-da-ba-ba-doo-down, down, da-ba-da-ba-da-down, da-ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba-doo-down, thwip-thwip, da-ba-doop-ba-doop. Comics. Hey everyone, welcome to issue 56 of the Comic Box, part of the Geek to Geek podcast network. I am Rob, your friendly neighborhood comic book geek, and I am joined for the first time on this show. We have spoken about you, but you've never actually been here. And I guess I didn't actually ask you before we started recording. Is there reason why you don't want to use your name? Like Void from the Geek to Geek podcast?
No, there's no problem there.
Okay.
No, that's just fine. Yep.
He doesn't, because the wife doesn't like using her name on the podcast.
Oh, okay.
So we call her the wife. Because I was thinking if needed, we could just call you Pecan Sandy Man.
That works too.
Or we can just call you Ryan. Maybe we call you Ryan Sandy Man.
But if we talk about Pecan Sandies, we need to at least explain why you call me Pecan Sandy.
And now we may have on a previous episode, it was when we all had a movie night and you were over, and specifically Liam was over, and you just thought you would grab cookies and you grabbed Pecan Sandies, which you don't even like. And Liam hates. He thinks they are the lowest form of food substance on the planet.
And I honestly don't remember why I started bringing them over, but then everyone hated them so much,
yes.
I had to bring them from then on. So
right.
I always did.
And we have a Facebook group chat with a handful of us, you, me, Dr. Ray, Liam. And so we made it where it actually, you can change people's names. There's nicknames, and we actually made your nickname Pecan Sandy. Pecan Sandy.
Is it still that?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
I think I probably changed it back at some point to Ryan.
And then I got a kick out of the last time I brought it over and you put tape over it, so now it's just sand.
Yes, because that is what they taste like. There are ones that I guess have toffee in them. Maybe those are better with.
Yeah, apparently they have peanuts and anyway, but yeah.
Yes. So that could be your nickname. Anyway, this week we are talking about Spider-Man Homecoming. We went and saw it yesterday, which would have been Sunday.
Yep.
Okay. I never know it. Like, I went to work today. It's Monday. I should know these things. But we went yesterday on Sunday. We will start with some general sort of spoiler-free stuff and general ideas, and then we will move into the spoiler cast stuff. Right. But first, because you're new and because this is how we do things on this show, there's the Weekly Geekery.
Okay.
So, and that is what we talk about, what we've been geeking out, how we have kept it geek, how we're keeping it geek this past week. So obviously we know Spider-Man Homecoming is in there, but it's a good idea for us to get to know you a little more.
Sure.
So what have you been up to this week in particular that's extra geeky?
Oh boy. Most people would call me a geek.
Yes.
I deal with computers at work. When I come home, I build electronics. In fact, I think one of the funnier geek things was I took a pair of 13-year-old laptops, including one you gave me, and built one working one out of the two. And I've already got a up-to-date copy of Linux on it, and I'm already using it to build Arduino and Maker products and do some little electronics design. So that's pretty geeky.
Yeah, and now this was an HP Pavilion that I got. It was my first laptop back in 2003.
It would have been the end of 2003 is when it was released.
So I probably got it
in
2003, 2004. No, it would have had to have been before the fall of 2003. I would have had to buy it because that was my computer in college. I guess you didn't need a computer at that point in time in college, but it was my first exposure to like a Cat5 cable. Like they had Ethernet,
That's actually amazing you say that, because that laptop, well, my laptop, which wasn't working, had a bad motherboard, was also my first laptop for college. And it was the first one that I had. No, it's the first one that I had purchased for myself for college. And I think it's funny that we both had almost the identical unit, and it's just funny because no one really needs a 13-year-old laptop. But I spent all this time fixing it and rebuilding it, and tomorrow a new battery arrives for it.
Nice.
So that's
because I was going to say, because it works. Honestly, even the one I gave you works fine. It's just the battery was so old you could not turn the computer on if that battery was still locked in. So I had to get rid of the battery, but you plug it in, you turn it on, it boots up faster than the computer that I had. I had a desktop computer that some guy named Matt, also doesn't like using his full name on the things. We call him some guy named Matt, built for me in 2000, I want to say 5 or 6. He built me, it was meant to be for gaming and editing. The same thing as this laptop that I have here, which he actually helped me find refurbished.
Good deal.
But
yeah, I've never seen very many MSI laptops. It's new to me.
Yeah. Well, it gets the job done.
Good deal.
So what else have you done this week that's particularly geeky?
All right. Well, I own a 2013 Prius, and I am one of those electrical engineering guys that likes to make sure everything works as well as it can. And I took the hybrid battery apart and cleaned contacts and cleaned it up and put it all back together, and actually made a difference. It works a little better. So I could really ramble on about that. So I'm holding back a lot.
I know, because you told me all about it on the way to the movie.
But yeah, I was rambling, and today was a good test because I sat in stop and go traffic because everything is closed. Every road around the apartment complex that I live in right now is closed.
Is it for the retarring or whatever that they're doing?
I don't know. So there's a main loop around the city we live in here. That part of that on ramp is closed. The main road into my town by my apartment complex is also closed, and we have 4-way stops all the way around it. So there's just 7 million people, and it was a good test for my hybrid because the engine isn't running because I'm stopped, but the air conditioner is running. So I just wanted to see how fast it'd tear through the battery now that it cleaned up the contacts, and it did significantly better than it ever has. I got almost 35 minutes out of it before it had to start the engine and charge it all back up. So
neat.
So yeah, so that's particularly geeky.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I think that's a good approximation of people just kind of getting to know the kind of geekdom. No, because you do stuff that I find absolutely fascinating, putting together old electronics. I basically just think anything with a vacuum tube because I don't know anything about old electronics.
Sure. Yeah.
But beyond that, I mean, we did have a movie night at your place a couple of weeks ago where we watched Johnny Mnemonic because I wanted to show you, and because do you remember what it was? It's his brain.
Yeah.
But he has
320 gigabytes of data.
Was it 300? I thought it was 3.
Oh, 3 what?
Gigs.
Oh,
was it 300?
So like when the movie began. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen
Johnny Mnemonic from 1990, whatever it is. Yeah.
So, Keanu Reeves. We knew too much. He apparently can store data in his brain. He's apparently a walking USB stick.
Right.
But his capacity is 160 gigs apparently.
Yeah, there we go.
And
yeah.
A major plot point in the movie is the fact that he attempts to store double that and retrieve it later.
He has brain seepage.
And all of these unusual non-medical terms that they invented for the movie. But yeah.
Well, so. My understanding is it's based off a short story by the guy that kind of invented cyberpunk. So, and then they put Keanu Reeves and Ice-T, right? Yeah.
And it was. I enjoyed it. It was a great movie.
All right. So that, in a nutshell, is Ryan. And for myself, I'm going to scroll down because I had to make a big list because it's been a couple weeks because I recorded some stuff ahead of time when I went off for the 4th of July, did my Spider-Man preview episode and that sort of thing. And so over the 4th of July weekend, I did a lot of comic book reading. I did a lot of catching up.
Oh, wow.
Which I guess was another thing that we did in the last week because you were up there as well. We were up at my cabin hanging out. So I reread the trades that exist. I think all of them. It's whatever I had of The Wicked, the Divine, which I think I told you a little bit about.
Yep.
This comic book where every 90 years, 12 people are basically turned into reincarnated gods, but they're only around for 2 years and then they die. So they almost explicitly target people in, say, their young 20s, and in this iteration, they're all pop stars. So think Lady Gaga, and a lot of them are, clearly inspired by other artists. One of them is very clearly sort of a David Bowie inspired type of character, but they become sort of these rock gods where going to their concerts is literally transcendent, and people get into trances or one of them, a guy who's Dionysus, who does like underground club scenes, is everybody's minds linked together. And so they're actually doing these, what they call miracles, but the idea is within 2 years they'll be dead, and then there's obviously a conspiracy and they start dying and that sort of thing. I read Volume 1, this was just recently, because I was coming up to the 4th of July, and my Hoopla app went off, and they're like, hey, you have like 4 things you haven't checked out this month, because I've just been reading stuff I have. And so it was, oh no, so I got those, and then I've already used up everything via this Hoopla app, which I don't know if you know about Hoopla. Hoopla Digital is the name of the website, and I think the name of the company, or maybe the app. But if you get a library card for, say, the library here in town, they are connected through Hoopla to allow you to check out digital copies of books.
Oh, that's amazing. No, I didn't know that.
Movies are kind of lame because you get 5 digital checkouts a month. And obviously the really popular like book titles aren't on there digitally. And TV shows, it's like 1 episode is one of your checkouts or rentals or however you want to do it. So that's lame, because otherwise it'd be like, cool, I'll just watch episodes of a TV show, download them to my phone.
Binge watch the whole thing.
You can't binge watch anything via Hoopla, but it's good. I try and get trades of comics, so it has like 6 issues or something in there that I can read as one, and I'll binge that. So I did Morning Glories, which has always kind of been off on the radar. I keep seeing it, especially in the Hoopla app. It's always in like my suggested reads, I think because I read Deadly Class. And it's the story of these random kids that get sent to this prep school with a full scholarship, but as soon as they're there, like the teachers start trying to kill them. And they can't get out of the school, and their cell phones don't work. And you're trying to figure out what's going on. And it seems like they're there to see which one of them is the best. And it might be some prophesized thing, or have to do with sacrificing these kids for a greater power. Some of the faculty might be really, really, really old. We're not really sure. So the first volume didn't really do a whole lot besides introduce the cast of characters, but I thought it was interesting. I'm trying to think. I guess teen, maybe older, as far as who I would suggest reading it. Like, there's some adult-y things because it's high school kids.
Right.
So there's jokes about sex and that sort of thing in there. And obviously there's some violence, but I don't think it's to the level of, like, Punisher Max, where you're literally seeing, like, viscera getting thrown around.
Right.
I read the side series for Invincible. There's one called Invincible Universe. And before that, apparently, there were 2 volumes called Guarding the Globe. And it's Robert Kirkman, the guy who created The Walking Dead, has this other really long-running series about a superhero that he's actually wrapping up, and it's on issue like 166 or something now. And he's bringing it to a close. And so this was a side series exploring the world of this particular superhero. The idea being people really die, and some of them are kind of analogs of like Marvel or DC superheroes, but the idea is it's his universe and he can do whatever he wants with it. So he does massive time jumps into the future. Like I said, a lot of people die and come back. He can do these big stories without worrying about what the editorial staff... Yeah. And they're saying, well, you can't kill this character. We need them for money. And then I am currently reading the J. Michael Straczynski run on Thor, is the one that I just grabbed. It was volume 1, and I just finished that up like last night or the night before. And that's the guy that created Babylon 5. He did a run on Thor after the character had been killed off. So it was his job to reintroduce the character. And it was sort of this design. I can't think of the artist off the top of my head, but it's basically these comics that I think sort of inspired the Thor movie.
Gotcha. Okay.
Except that in the Thor movie, Thor is already alive, but like his whole look as how he has the armor going all the way down his arms and that sort of thing. That's not what traditionally Thor looks like in the Marvel comics.
Right.
But now he obviously looks much different. So this was sort of updating all the designs of the characters, and it's Thor in this quest to rebuild Asgard after this massive event that's called Ragnarok, which is the death of the Asgardian gods, the end of Norse mythology. It's their world-ending myth. And apparently it was an ongoing cycle in the Thor comics, and he figures out a way to stop it. We're going to talk a lot more about that when we do our prep episode for Thor Ragnarok. which makes I kind of need to read the Thor Ragnarok storyline. I didn't need to for this. It was a good jumping on point, and a lot of people really like it. Previously, I'd read a book of Walt Simonson Thor, who is like the guy who kind of did the classic Thor. Everything is super brightly colored. It's a lot of it takes place in space. A lot of that inspired the look of the Thor movies when they do Asgard stuff. That's all Walt Simonson stuff because he wrote and drew Thor for a very long time. Anyway, been reading that. And then as far as TV goes, the wife and I finished Orange is the New Black.
Oh,
it was fine. The season was fine. We finished Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23, which was also fine. And now we're just kind of playing around trying to find something else, and nothing's really stuck. We tried Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, could not get into it. We tried... what else did we try? I feel like we didn't finish Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, I don't think. We got like 3/4 the way through and jumped. And we tried Glow, The Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, because Fletch suggested and told me I need to at least watch for 3 episodes. We did. It feels like it's kind of plodding, and it doesn't really seem like the wife's kind of show. So at that point, we just kind of reverted back and started watching episodes of Parks and Rec, which I'm sorry, is better than anything else that we were trying. But the most recent season 3 of The Flash and Arrow and all that is on there. So I started season 3 of The Flash, about 3 episodes in. And then I added Sense8 because Joe over at the Geektitude podcast just always talking about how great Sense8 is. And I started listening to another podcast that's advertised on Geektitude, which is a podcast called, they call it TG Geeks, but it's Two Gay Geeks. And it's these 2 guys that are older, I'll just say, than most people that I'm hearing on like geek podcasts. Mostly it's 20s or 30s. These guys are older, and so they have this more wealth of knowledge. And they were also talking about how great Sense8 was. So it's by the Wachowskis, the brothers then, sisters now that did The Matrix.
I didn't know that it was by the Wachowski sisters.
Yes.
Okay. And I also didn't know that. I guess I need to stay up on.
Well, they've always sort of kept out of the public eye. Like they did like 2 interviews when making the entire Matrix trilogy. They let Joel Silver and the producers handle all of that, and the stars handle all of that. They always kind of wanted to do their own thing. And then the last thing, because I haven't thrown enough out there, I'm looking at my time, we're coming up on like 20 minutes and we haven't talked about anything yet, is Convergence. Or Convergence, as it's capital C-O-N.
Yes, I've been seeing a lot of posts about this.
Yes, so I posted a ton of pictures on Facebook. I posted a bunch of pictures, same ones on Twitter. So you can find me on Twitter at ComicBoxCast. I posted a lot of photos, mostly comic book costumes. Those are the ones I took pictures of, but if you click that hashtag, you'll see all the cool costumes there. And it's just this big convention here in the Twin Cities, and it's usually on Independence Day weekend, and I'm at my cabin every year. I've done it for the last 15 years. I'm up there, and so I never get to go to this thing. And then I came back and started seeing posts by my friends that are like hosting a party room or something here, and they're like, oh, we're so excited for it to come, and it's on its way. And I'm like, whoa. It's not here yet? And so I lucked out, and the short version is I managed to get a ticket at a discounted price, which was great because they are really expensive at the door. And it is Thursday night, and then all day Friday, all day Saturday, and part of the day Sunday. This convention in 2 hotels. And in your badge cost, your ticket cost, they have free food, they have free like pop and water and drinks and snacks, and they have just fruits and veggies as well as the food that's not as good for you. And then at 8 o'clock, all of the rooms on either side of the pool open up, and they're all volunteer. The whole thing is volunteer run, but they're themed party rooms put on by people that aren't necessarily connected with the convention as a whole. So there's a Star Wars room, a Supernatural room, one room that my friends put on was the Daily Bugle. There was a Hobbit hole. There was one based on the Fast and the Furious franchise, an anime room, the room, where all they did was have screenings of The Room, the film by Tommy Wiseau. So people just walk, and there's literally arrows taped on the floor to show you which direction to go because there's just so many people. And you go from room to room, and they have drinks. Some have alcoholic drinks, some don't. Some have snacks, some have trivia or activities you can do. So you just spend the evening making these loops and just having fun with a ton of people in a bunch of cool costumes. Mm-hmm. And so that was a blast. So I did a Wild West Punisher that I slapped together for a previous convention on Thursday night, and then all day Friday and Saturday I was Mad Eye Moody, and I was dying the entire time. It was so hot in there because it's a big open area, so the AC isn't doing a whole lot. Mm-hmm. And I'm wearing multiple layers, a big coat, and a leather vest.
Really old shoes.
Old shoes that I got, yep, so I could spray paint one silver. I had a wig on. The eye, was kind of giving me a headache. But we got good photos. I got a lot of good compliments. I look forward to going back next year if I'm able to. Speaking of conventions, I think I've mentioned this already. There's another one that's coming, and I think it's just called Minnesota Fan Fest or Fan Fest Minnesota or something like that. That's going to be coming up in a few weeks that I'm going to be a panelist for, and I think Liam will be a panelist as well. We don't know what panels yet. We just signed up to say which ones we want to do, and I think they don't let anybody do more than 2 a day because it's me, man. Mm-hmm. I'd go all day. And there's enough different panels that I could.
I think you're right.
You
would.
There's a Marvel on Netflix, and there's DC versus Marvel Comics, DC versus Marvel Movies. There's all sorts of different panels that I could totally sit in on, and would probably run and annoy people. Maybe I should be the moderator for the day. Maybe that
exactly.
makes more sense.
Yep.
But that is my extended weekly geek read. That's it. That's all I'm gonna say. Do you want to bring us into news? Little
no, that's all right.
How about just do this with me? News. I like that. Liam and I did that the other week, and I think I'm going to keep it.
Okay.
I just have a couple brief pieces of news that I just want to plow through before we get to our main topic this week. First, very sad piece of news. Stan Lee's wife, Joan, his wife of 70 years, passed away this past week. And for anybody who saw the Stan Lee, I don't know if it's still on there, but there was a Stan Lee documentary on Netflix. And it shows some of them talking about, she just seems like the coolest lady in the world. And in the clip that I will include, Marvel released a sort of tribute clip where it's Marvel editor-in-chief Joe Quesada and Stan Lee at a panel or an interview at a comic convention somewhere. And they're talking about his wife, and they released this clip. It's about 5 minutes, so link is in the show notes, where they explain that she is the one really responsible for the entire Marvel universe. Stan Lee was writing comics. He didn't really enjoy it. Art Goodman, I think, was his boss at the time, the one who ran is probably Timely Comics at the time. And it was all action scenes. That's what the kids want to read. That's what the boys want to read is these big fight scenes. And he's like, well, what if we just did character work and actually had relatable characters? He's like, no, action scenes. And so he was going to quit. And he went to his wife and he said, I'm done. I want to get out of this thing. I want to write something else. I want to write novels. I want to do whatever. And she said, well, why don't do this first? If you're going to quit anyway, the next comic that you write it the way you would want a comic book to be written. Mm-hmm. And he wrote the Fantastic Four of a family that have family problems, that are super relatable. And it took off, and Fantastic Four #1 is considered the beginning of what we call the Marvel Age. And from that point on, their sales were great. Mm-hmm. And so Stan Lee got the go-ahead, and that's pretty much where he went and created the Marvel Universe. So we have Joan Lee to thank for that. So thank you, Joan. And if that Stan Lee documentary is on Netflix, it gives you a really nice idea of their relationship, and it's very sweet. They're very much that sweet old couple that's still in love 70 years later. But that is our Marvel Comics news. In Marvel TV news, this came out I think just today. They revealed the cast of the upcoming show New Warriors, which if anybody has heard anything about this out there, it's probably because it's going to feature the character of Squirrel Girl. And this is a character that has been around for decades, but only recently got really popular. And there's a new Squirrel Girl comic that has a lot of people really digging the character. There was a panel at Convergence that was just about Squirrel Girl. But so people are excited for that. Otherwise, this doesn't seem to have a whole lot in common with the New Warriors comic book of old. There's some characters like Speedball and I think Night Thrasher, which are going to be in it. But otherwise, it's supposed to be a comedy program. And I assume it's going to be set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe because that's kind of how Marvel is doing it as opposed to DC doing separate things. Mm-hmm. You know, I was talking to Armando Chavez on Twitter at Koji, at Kotji. That's off the top of my head, if I'm right. Fan of the show. And friend of the show. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to be a naysayer because more comic book stuff is neat, especially when they go obscure. But I kind of feel like it's going to go the way of Powerless. I don't think it's really going to stick around. Anyway, so the casting of Squirrel Girl is Milana Vaintrub. She is Uzbeki by birth. And have you ever seen This Is Us?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I need to see it. I haven't seen it.
I've heard some people like it. I think the wife watched some of it. I don't know if she still watches it. But there's a character, Sloane, on that show. That was on 8 episodes or something. And that is the actress that's going to be playing Squirrel Girl. I don't know. She looks like a Hollywood actress, which means pretty. I would kind of want Squirrel Girl to be maybe shorter, maybe, more full figured, and I don't mean like having a large bust. I mean like a normal everyday human being. Mm-hmm. Squirrel Girl in the comics right now is in college, but I think when she was introduced, she was still a high school student as well. So we'll see. And she was listed on IMDb as Subway Rat Woman in the 2016 Ghostbusters. So she's got some rodent experience. Marvel movie news. Spider-Man, which we're going to talk about, but the big news here is it took $117 million opening weekend, which has put the MCU as a whole over $12 billion worldwide.
Wow.
If you want a tentpole franchise, and this is Disney, they have Star Wars too. Like, should we be buying stock? Like, I don't see this ending. Everybody keeps talking about the bubble. Are we going to get sick of comic book movies? Star Wars is never going to end because it's this massive, expansive universe that exists starting in film where Marvel is the comic book, so you have everybody always comparing.
Now we're really hoping that, just to kind of tangent for a moment, we're really hoping that universe doesn't family vine like it has for the past 45 years and actually start to branch out and become all of these unique stories.
Right. I mean, the origins of the Star Wars saga was supposed to be the Skywalker family, was what George Lucas originally... I mean, there's interview clips from when they did the original trilogy where you have Mark Hamill being like, oh yeah, and then we're going to go and we're going to see the origins of Darth Vader. And then after that, we're going to get to see what happens to the future in the Skywalker family. So apparently Lucas had that in mind all along.
Sure.
But yeah, we're getting all of these extra side stories, and I'm kind of a Star Wars guy.
Yeah, I am too.
I don't know everything.
I like both of the Star universes, whether it's Wars or Trek, but
equal opportunity Star fan.
So it's like Science Force. Anyway,
one or the other.
One could start a big argument there, which apparently happened this past week too. They, I don't know if you heard on ABC or on a news organization. Had mentioned that 2 people got into a huge fight over Star Wars versus Star Trek universe.
I feel like I did see something about that online.
It was hysterical to read about it. So it's definitely worth looking up.
Hey, people are passionate about their geekdom. The last bits of... I think this is my last bits of news. No, I have one more piece after this. The New Mutants starts filming tomorrow as of this recording. So the New Mutants starts filming on the 11th of July, and that's set to open next April, which means it's going to be a very X-Men heavy year because we're also going to get Deadpool 2 and X-Men Dark Phoenix in 2018.
Wow.
Yeah. So Deadpool 2 should be fine. X-Men Dark Phoenix, honestly, I'm kind of at the point of not caring. As much as we all loved the X-Men movies, the first 2, anyway. And First Class was okay. Apocalypse, not so much.
No.
Days of Future Past, okay. But they're doing the Phoenix again. And I guess the idea is we're going to wipe the slate clean and show you another,
another option.
That you can have of Dark Phoenix. But you know what? They already did it right in the cartoon. And before that, they did it fine in the comics. It was like a 3-issue arc, and is still considered one of the greatest X-Men stories ever told.
Wow. Okay.
You know,
All right.
succinct storytelling. Get
Sure.
comic writers. Yeah. Somebody call Chris Claremont and bring him in. He's the guy that wrote it. Sorry. I went over your head. DC News with the chop, 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 chop. From a picture on the back, that has been leaked online, the back of the Blu-ray box for the Batman and Harley Quinn animated movie, which is the next DC animated film that's coming out. It looks like the one after that is going to be Batman Gotham by Gaslight. Think steampunk Batman.
Oh, nice. Nice.
I'm trying to remember if I've read this at some point. I'm a big Elseworlds fan.
Both of these I went to see, so... Yeah,
what's that?
I haven't seen the first one that you were talking about.
The Batman and Harley Quinn?
Right, yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I don't even know if that's out yet. I am not caught up on my DC animated stuff. I saw the Justice League Dark, and it was okay. But I have not seen the Teen Titans, the Judas Contract, which was their most famous storyline. The Teen Titans were basically all of the Justice League sidekicks made their own team. And then they had this very powerful storyline in New Teen Titans, I believe was the comic. And I haven't seen that one yet. So I'm behind on my DC animated stuff. Maybe we'll have to do a review episode once we move past as many of these Marvel movies and stuff as we can. But that's it. That's it for news. Except for one more piece. Umbrella Academy might be coming to Netflix. It's a comic by Gerard Way. I've never read it. Hey, if you're an Umbrella Academy fan, that might be coming to Netflix. That's it for news. Now we can finally go and start moving on to our topic of the week. But first, this.
I'm Void.
And I'm Beej.
And together, we're the Geek to Geek podcast. Well, we make it. It is kind of us, but I guess it's separate.
Every week, we pick a topic from geek or digital culture and chat about it for a while.
And you're invited. We talk about books and movies, games, comics, the internet.
Or really whatever we feel like.
Yeah, that too.
So look for the Geek to Geek podcast on iTunes.
Or wherever your podcasts are sold. Or downloaded. Or whatever.
And we are back. Yay! This is the part some guy named Matt always yells at me for because I go, hey, did you know we are part of the Geek to Geek podcast network? I'm going to make this short and sweet. Head to geektogeekcast.com. You can find out about all the shows on our network. And while we're at it, we do not pay money to advertise. We have no money to advertise any of our shows. So, and I'm just going to ask for me. They can do it on their own. If you want to head over to iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play or wherever you are listening to this and leave us a review, specifically on iTunes. Those star ratings and reviews are so helpful. And the last one we got for this show was like beginning of June. So Liam and I keep trying to do a thing where if we get up to, at this point, our goal is 25 reviews by the end, or star ratings, because I think it just says the number of total reviews. By the end of July, we are going to do a review episode of, I don't remember anymore. I don't know if it was the Roger Corman Fantastic Four, which was an unreleased Fantastic Four movie that was made solely so they could hang on to the rights. So they intentionally made a terrible movie, and they had to screen it once in one location or something like that in order to maintain the rights to the characters so they can make a better movie down the road. Or... I don't know. I got a bootleg of the Justice League live-action television show from the 90s somewhere. That's pretty terrible. But we'll figure it out. The point is, 25 star ratings and reviews. It's going to be a Comic Box After Dark, which means we'll be drinking, we will be swearing, and we will be having a really good time. This will not be a podcast for children, but it will be for all of our fans that have stuck with us throughout this time. That's it. Let's get to the topic of the week, shall we? Spider-Man Homecoming. Yes, you're just waiting for me to shut up. I will do so now. No spoilers. What did you think of the movie?
I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot better than some of the other Marvel movies I've seen. For example, Civil War, that type of thing. I think it was better writing. I think I got to admit that there was a lot packed in that movie.
It was dense, yeah.
And you kind of had to keep up because they did a pretty good job of leaving some details in the background and things that perhaps they did in the other movies and I didn't pay enough attention. But they were more thorough. I feel like the movie was they were more thorough. they thought out the scenes better. That probably doesn't make any sense. But...
No, I think it does. I think it's the idea that when they wrote it, they were concise enough in doing it. It doesn't trail off. It's not too deep. It's easy to understand. It's sort of written on the surface, but then with the direction, everything else, there's everything else in the background.
I feel like they did a lot more storyboarding in preparation for this movie than before. I think they really worked hard on action scenes previously, but build-up scenes and making the story flow was missing. And then for this Spider-Man, it was phenomenal. It was much better.
I'll agree with you on that one too. I think some of the other Marvel movies and even TV shows, Netflix stuff, they run into pacing problems sometimes. And so you definitely, you're riding that roller coaster of the movie, but then they get stuck in sort of a bit of a rut, or they're doing, I think Age of Ultron had a lot of issues there.
Yep.
Where there's moments where you're like, I get that I'm watching another action scene, but like, I would just rather you push the story along. I get that we're here to sell toys. And that's, let's say that about Spider-Man Homecoming right out front. This movie looks like there was definitely some input from the marketing department, in here. And we'll get to that when we talk about the story.
Yeah,
some of that's
spoilers.
Things,
but some of that is spoilers. Yep.
Yeah. But I thought all the performances in this movie were really good. Everyone from the side characters to our main characters. Michael Keaton killed it. Great.
Absolutely.
Great movie villain. And when it comes to Spider-Man movies, a lot of people keep saying, oh, it's the best Spider-Man movie I've seen, whatever. And I don't know. Because I really like Spider-Man 2. This is the Sam Raimi ones, so the ones that starred Tobey Maguire.
Right.
The second one with Alfred Molina as Dr. Octopus is one of my favorite comic book movies ever because it's bright, it's very comic booky, it's written very comic booky, and it's paced well. It's a really well put together movie. It's the Dark Knight of the Spider-Man movies, I think. It's got just enough.
That's a good analogy.
Because it's Sam Raimi directing, so it's got great camp and that sort of thing. Whereas obviously Dark Knight was darker in tone and a master class of cinematic storytelling. But Spider-Man 2 is just so good that I don't know where these two balance out, because they both have really good villains. They make sympathetic villains, which is so important to have a good story.
Right.
So I'm really not sure. But I also haven't seen Spider-Man 2 in a long time. However, this is very much an MCU treat, because the MCU does a great job of throwing things in there for fans. And I started doing Easter eggs, and I put down the ones that I picked up, that I caught. And then I went online, and holy crap, you guys. This movie is so full of Easter eggs. And there's ones that, we'll get to it, because there's ones that I kind of noticed, and then I went back and did the research and realized it's totally different. There's so many more out there. I'm trying to think what else I can say without spoilers.
There's so much I want to say.
I know, there's a lot of little touch.
There's spoilers.
Go see this movie.
Yep.
How about that? It's a good movie. You're going to see it anyway. Spider-Man is the most profitable fictional character or something that Marvel has, certainly, over the years. With all the toys and the t-shirts and the merchandise and being in other people's movies. But it's good. It's good. The Iron Man stuff is good. The Happy Hogan stuff is good. Yeah, I have some things to say that aren't... It's not just compliments. I'm not over the moon about the movie, but I really, really liked it. It's a really, really good movie. And it certainly feels like a welcome piece of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Right. I feel like they worked much harder at this.
And it's not an origin story.
Right. Yep.
That's, I guess, a little spoilery, but you don't even get like an opening credit sequence that explains the origin, because we get it. Right. There's a throwaway line, because in the trailers, it's shown that his friend finds out that he's Spider-Man. There's a throwaway line where they're walking down the street and he explains. I guess that's minor spoilers. Okay.
Yep.
But fine, whatever. We liked this movie. It was good. Go see it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now let's get into spoiler territory. What did you really think about this movie?
Well, first of all, the one thing that I immediately want to bring up is Michael Keaton.
Okay.
I appreciate the character he played. I appreciate how written that character was. I appreciate the sympathy his character had.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of things. There was even a point where he does something very good at the end of the movie, which I figured that Rob would prefer that I'd let everyone go see it than tell you what he did.
No, the whole point. Hey, we're full spoilers. So
Okay,
usually
all
I like
right.
talking story, and then I get into the individual characters.
But I'll back up a little bit. So
Yeah.
I do like the fact that they did give an origin story to his character, and the origin story was much simpler and more relatable than often they are. Like,
yeah, he didn't fall in a vat of acid. He's not
Right.
the Sandman in Spider-Man 3, who not only killed Uncle Ben, kind of, sort of, maybe, but also was in a test where he got sucked into sand and became.
Right.
Yeah, this is why this character, I think, was a good pick for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where yes, you have the Lizard and all these like creatures, but specifically here,
he was a man.
he's an inventor, and a lot of the
Yep.
Marvel Cinematic Universe tries to root itself in, granted it's future tech,
Yep.
but in tech.
But then I loved how they made it relatable. Whether or not I'm sure they did this on purpose, but it wasn't just him. They had another gentleman, which of course I personally relate to, being an electrical engineer. There's another gentleman helping him build all of these weapons using mixed technologies, and he makes his money that way. And there's a time frame that is believable in regard to how long it took for him to gather what he had in terms of tech and all of the different story that played out because of it. I loved the fact that they made him the father of the love interest, and I loved how his character handled Peter Parker in so many different ways. And Michael Keaton just did a beautiful job, because he can make some of the strangest faces, but he can be so expressionless at
Yeah.
the same time, and that really made that character.
Yeah. No, because he has the Michael Keaton little twitches things in there. Yes. Okay, but yeah, so let's talk story. And you're right, it's totally relatable. In the beginning, we find out that he is a scrapper,
Basically,
for lack of a better term, a construction guy, and he's there to help deconstruct the alien ruins at the end of the Battle of New York. At the end of the
Professional
first...
salvagers, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he gets, his job taken away by what we find out is the Department of Damage Control, which we'll get to when we get to Easter eggs, because that's a massive Marvel Easter egg. And interesting, because it's something that wasn't really mentioned in any of the other movies, but yet this department exists at the end of the first Avengers, which is, in this timeline, 8 years ago, which does get kind of confusing, because the Avengers was supposed to take place in like 2012, but Spider-Man Homecoming is supposed to take place kind of like 2016, 2017? Or 2016. But if it's 8 years later, that means that this movie takes place in 2020. So there's some confusion there as far as the time. And we had talked about that.
Right,
about
yeah.
how they now have to try and keep a timeline straight, instead of just being like, don't worry about it.
And
like
I
the
thought it was
comics
interesting where they didn't purposely set this out 10 years ahead of time or 20 years ahead of time, so that way we could kind of assume there's some futuristic tech. No, it's kind of lockstep with our current timeline in the real world, and that came as a surprise to me too.
But no, it's true. He's a guy who loses his job and needs to provide for his family, and so what he decides to do is crime. Is finding these alien artifacts, and he brings them to a character that we know from the comic books as the Tinkerer.
Gotcha.
Who creates weapons and suits for technology-based supervillains. A lot of Spider-Man's other villains had weapons created by the Tinkerer. And he starts making them into weapons. They have things like an Ultron arm from Age of Ultron that somehow got away, and they were able to turn that into a laser gun. But it's perfect because it fits in the world, and I think that's a great thing this movie does, is it has lots of little pieces in there that helps you build within the MCU. It's a Spider-Man story. It doesn't feel like a world-shattering event, because in the end, the MacGuffin, the plot that they use, the plot device that they use just to build on the character development, is the Vulture stealing a load of weapons or a load of Avengers-y things from Tony Stark, which is the job he never wanted to pull because it was too high profile.
Right.
Because he didn't want to ever get caught. And he's like, we're not doing it. It's too risky. You don't steal from Tony Stark.
Right.
Because there's all sorts of crazy technology. And the Tinker is like, no, I can do it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But that it feels grounded. He feels like a hero that isn't even necessarily, you know, he's out of his league in DC even, you know?
Yep.
Like he feels like he belongs in New York, but not in the suburbs. Love that. Loved that. One of the best moments in the film is when he's in the suburbs and he goes to shoot his webs and just kind of goes off in the sky and there's like, oh wait, there's nothing to web to. And you just see him sprinting through a golf course. I loved that. What they did with the character to make him feel like a teenager was great. The whole opening sequence with the cell phone video, I thought was very clever.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that.
I thought, you know, that type of characterization was great. However, just as an overall thing, I would have liked to have seen more like snark from Peter Parker. I would have liked to see more of the comedy come from him and his dialogue towards the people he's fighting and less situational comedy. It's this funny thing happens to Peter Parker, so the movie is funny, rather than Peter Parker is a funny guy. Because I know we have Iron Man, who's the quippy one, but, you know, and then you have Chris Pratt in space, you know, as Star-Lord, but it's just Chris Pratt in space,
right?
You know, who also is a funny guy. So I get, you know, and that a lot of this character was him. He's still learning to be Spider-Man. That's kind of the whole point of this movie, is him realizing and coming to the conclusion that he's not ready for the big time yet. He wants it more than anything in the world, but he's not quite ready yet.
Right. And
he needs to stay a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man for a while. Stick to Queens. So I get why they didn't have as much of that. There's a little bit, but it's like he starts doing it when he's fighting the guys in the Avengers masks, and then everything goes wrong, and at that point he kind of loses some of that. And
he
so
backs off a little bit.
Yeah, because he realizes he's not necessarily that great at this yet. He doesn't really know what he's doing, and he's still learning. And I read part of an interview where that's the reason they made him afraid of heights. This is not a Spider-Man who is Spider-Man yet. He's still learning. You know, he's only been at it for a short period of time before Civil War. And this is 6 months later or whatever they said it was. So, like, yeah, it's a character that's still learning how to do it. So they wanted him to have flaws. Right. And I think that was a really smart move on their part.
I think he executes the teenager mentality well for his character. And just how, you know, he's focused, but yet still confused all the time anyway. Yeah. I enjoyed that. So,
as far as the other sort of story elements go, I mean, there's obviously the big moments. I wanted to talk a little bit about the little touches they do in this movie.
Sure.
The idea that, well, first of all, Ned is fantastic. I know some people maybe could have used a little less Ned in the movie, but I thought it was great. They very much kind of did the same thing they did with Ant-Man, where sort of the friends, the sidekicks, become a big part of the movie. And it's building out your supporting cast. And your supporting cast members are always the ones that are the most fun, because they can be a little more developed and go through less development over the course of the movie. It's Captain Jack Sparrow is Captain Jack Sparrow from the moment you meet him, because he's not our main characters. We're following Will Turner and Elizabeth, you know, in the Pirates movies. So giving him his own movie was the mistake. I haven't seen the new one, but in the fourth one, when he was the main character, it didn't work out. So, I mean, that's part of the reason why side characters are so much fun. They can be a little more one note. But I thought Ned was really great. But there's the scene where they're doing sit-ups and they're still talking about, you know, Captain America and his time with the Avengers. And the gym teacher walks by and just goes, you know, looking good there, Parker. And he has a moment, and then he starts grunting like it's harder to do it. And it's subtle, and I caught it, but it didn't feel super... What's the right word? It's deliberate, but it wasn't crammed in our faces. If you weren't paying that close of attention, there's a lot of these little things in this movie, I feel, that are great. There's the scene where he's trapped under the rubble, which is taken out of Spider-Man number 33. It's a very famous Spider-Man thing where he needs to sort of call upon his willpower and think about all the people that matter to him and why he needs to get up right now. And I was thinking more about that scene and just how great it was of a character moment. Because at first, it was one of those, like, how many more times do I need to see him take the mask off? Because I do feel that's one of my complaints. There's a lot of that in this movie. And I get it, because every Spider-Man has to pull his mask off 90 times because that actor needs to get that FaceTime in. Think about all the different superhero movies you've seen. End of Batman Returns, Michael Keaton pulls the mask off because we need to see his face to see him emote for the final, character development of the movie.
Sure.
And then
I guess I hadn't thought about it before. Yeah, it's interesting.
Oh, it's all like, we think back to Spider-Man 3 where Topher Grace plays Venom, and he's 90% of the time, it's not the Venom face. It's his face, and it's stupid. I'm sorry. It's dumb. Give us Spider-Man. It's okay. But I kept thinking, at the time I thought it was kind of corny where he's like, come on, Spider-Man. And he's talking, come on, Spider-Man. But you think, this is a 15-year-old kid who names himself Spider-Man. That's so much more powerful than I was taking it initially. Like, it's an emotional scene, but he's not calling himself Peter because he's thinking of himself basically calling himself Iron Man, calling himself Superman kind of idea. He's calling himself the thing he wants to be in order to inspire himself to get up and keep moving. And I loved that moment. But I think obviously the big one, and the one we want to talk about, is the scene in the car.
Yes,
absolutely. The best scene with the villain in this entire movie has no costumes in it, has no explosions in it. And you were telling me about this last night. And this is when we decided, you're like, no, I don't think there's podcasts, I don't know what to say. And we had this conversation about this part this character.
You got me on the spot, and I got to remember what on earth I said. But...
No, it was just, so tell me everything you loved about this scene and Michael Keaton.
Okay, so I love the fact that in the scene, they pulled up in front of the school. Was it prom or homecoming? Homecoming. And so the Vulture's daughter, whose name Liz, is going out with Peter Parker, and they arrive, and the Vulture had actually drove them to school, and all the way on the way there, all these clues are being dropped by Liz about, Peter disappeared here, he wasn't up in the tower in DC, and all of these different moments in the movie, and all of a sudden...
He knows Spider-Man,
And all of a sudden, the Vulture realizes who Peter Parker is. And first of all, that moment is neat, because normally movies will try to run with all these clues were dropped, but they didn't get it anyway. Well, no. I mean, they really treated the Vulture as an intelligent father figure, and he just picked it up immediately and figured it out. And then I love the fact that, first of all, he had a good conversation with him, even though he was holding a gun and was ready to shoot him with it. Peter Parker did not respond or confirm or deny anything during the conversation. And lastly, the Vulture still let Peter Parker get out, and he said that line, "Go and show my daughter a good time." And for a villain, I thought he had a tremendous amount of respect and character, and still had that huge sympathetic father figure going on. And that was a lot more character development than I ever expected in a Marvel movie. So,
no, and I think that's key. And when you were saying that, I was like, oh no, you got to come and talk about that, because it's true. It wasn't just the fact that he's intelligent, and it's not the like if we go back to other Spider-Man movies where it's not until the mask gets blown off that it's like, right, how did I not see this coming? Yep. Type of moment where, I mean, they make it obvious that this is what's happening, but as you're seeing Michael Keaton, as Adrian Toomes slowly working this out and doing his Michael Keaton faces.
Yep.
And then that
was the moment where I'm seeing all those different faces where he's driving around. He's kind of like,
he's doing his twitchy stuff. But no, when they have that talk, and when he's like, I owe you, you saved my daughter's life, so okay. But where he's, stay out of my business or I'll kill you. But he keeps reiterating, because that's what I'm willing to do for my family. Yep. It's this John Q, if you ever saw that movie, where it's Denzel Washington, and he, holds a bunch of people hostage in order to get his son a heart transplant, or,
Right. Yep.
And so it's this idea of like, I'm doing all of this for my family. And clearly they don't really get in the conversation of, but do you need a car this nice? Did you need a house that big?
Right.
If you're just doing this for your family? Clearly, you're going a little further.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they don't say it explicitly. They let us as the audience say, okay, yes, he's doing it for his family, but he doesn't need that much. That money could be in a college fund for his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
That money could be in, investments or something else, instead of all of this luxury.
Right.
And so it gives you a little bit of, well, at least we can still say he's a bad guy. But the idea is, the Vulture, he kills the first Shocker in the movie.
Right.
And,
by complete accident.
Right. I thought that was the anti. But that's the first time I think he kills anybody.
Yeah. And then he kind of handles it like, all right, I still have to maintain authority here.
Right.
But I just completely destroyed him.
So now I have to act tough
gun.
about it. Right. And the idea that he's willing to kill Spider-Man, but that's because Spider-Man is going to get in the way of him providing for his family.
Yep.
Not just Spider-Man will foil my plans.
Right.
Kind of thing.
But that makes it all that more relatable.
Yes, and I liked his character. And plus, our villain doesn't die at the end.
Right.
Thank you.
And even then, he has a significant amount of sympathy and character. Because there's a moment where he could have told someone that he knew who Spider-Man was.
He could have told Mac...
And he doesn't say anything.
Right. He could have told Mac Gargan, who is... in the comic books, the character of the Scorpion is the guy who actually has a scorpion tattooed on his neck in the movie.
Right.
And that's our big thing, is he mentions his friends on the outside, which hints at a Sinister Six movie.
And they shot so much of that scene and so much of that delayed conversation that that is something going to run with in a future movie. I mean, obviously,
or at the least, they're teasing heavy. We'll see if people want to see a villain movie from Marvel in the future. I mean, I don't... Sure, why not? Or if they just make the next Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man versus the Sinister Six or whatever.
Sure. Yep.
But yes, I liked that because it wasn't a evil mastermind who's going to come back, because their relationship is going to be so complicated.
Right.
It's the idea of, well, I'll still kill you for getting in the way, and they removed the daughter from the equation is the other thing. So now his family's going to be safe and on the other side of the country.
Right.
But no, I thought that was great. I don't know if he necessarily outshone Tom Holland as Spider-Man, because fantastic. We might as well just get into characters at this point and actors. Great jobs all around.
Yeah.
Tom Holland is a fantastic Peter Parker and a fantastic Spider-Man. And he just seems like a really nice guy outside of the movie too, in all the interviews and things. Or if you saw the lip sync battle or whatever.
No, I haven't.
Okay.
Although those are always usually good to watch.
It's a thing. But he just seems like a genuinely nice guy. And a kid who grew up reading comic books, watching the Marvel movies, because he's only he's 19 or something now.
Right.
These movies started when he was 10.
Yep.
They've been around that long, guys. So you have a kid who literally grew up a huge fan watching Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man in 2008 or whatever it is. Yeah. And now he's acting alongside him still as that character, and he gets to be Spider-Man. You can tell he loves every minute of it.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and there's that bit where our other friend online was saying, and I had read this in an article as well, I think he did it on an interview on one of the late night talk shows where he actually went undercover in a New York high school or whatever for a while.
I was reading about that just today,
yeah. And maintained his cover the whole time because nobody knew who he was because the movie hadn't come out yet.
That's
or
awesome.
Maybe Civil War had, but if people didn't recognize him and he faked an American accent the whole time, because he's not. He's from, I know his grandfather is from like the Isle of Man or something like that.
Gotcha.
But yeah, but he did a great job. I guess I could have used less Aunt May.
Oh, I didn't mind that character.
It wasn't
at all.
bad.
I thought it was executed well. I enjoyed the little Easter egg. I don't know if you would call that an Easter egg at the end, where he gets the suit back. He's trying it on in his room, and the camera pans around, and she's standing there looking at him. You know, right as he pulls the mask off.
Yeah. And I get it. Aunt May is an integral part of the character, but I love this. The name Uncle Ben was never said in this movie.
Yep.
Not once. All he says is everything that she's been through recently. Right. That's it. The words power and responsibility are never said. We never get the great power comes great responsibility. There's other things in here that I would have liked to have seen. It seems like this Spider-Man doesn't have a traditional spider sense. And part of that was the director saying it's been done in every other movie. They spend all this time to stylistically figure out how they want to do spider sense. And instead, we just get a throwaway line back in Civil War about him having heightened senses and needing the lenses. But we don't get any more explanation of that in this one. I could have used a little more. Just give me some throwaway science blah, something.
I thought they would have run with it on the what's the friend's name all of a sudden? Ned. I thought that banter back and forth, can you do this? Can you do that?
Yeah.
Talk to them. I thought that they would cover it that way, but they didn't seem to.
Can the spider bite me? I mean, I don't know if I'd let it. I suppose it was pretty painful. No, Ned was great. I really like Ned. He's a wonderful sidekick. The guy in the chair, as he calls it, in the library on all the computers. And the teacher comes and asks him what he's doing, and his mind races. I'm looking at porn? But I thought it was wonderful. All the characters did a good job. Shocker was kind of a throwaway mid-level villain. I don't know if we needed, if you pull out the Shocker, I don't know that we necessarily would have lost the movie. It was a nice touch because, again, it wrapped in the Captain America story because the gauntlet that he has, and I have it down on my Easter eggs where he says where he gets it, or where they got some of the technology, is the giant fist that Crossbones uses at the beginning of Civil War. So some of that is there, and then they added the Shocker thing, to it or whatever.
Right.
But all those little touches, the little bits of learning what's going on with Tony Stark. He sold Avengers Tower, and they're moving upstate to the Avengers compound, and all, just having Happy Hogan as the point of contact instead of Tony Stark was nice. Yeah. I suppose, let me say this. I was wrong about a lot of stuff in what I thought was going to happen. And then there was things I really wanted that I didn't get. I wanted one throwaway mention of the devil of Hell's Kitchen. One throwaway mention of what's going on in another neighborhood. Tell me what about that thing that happened in Harlem? Because oh wow, why can't I think of the character's name now? From Luke Cage, the end bad guy in Luke Cage, because all I can think of is Diamondback, but it's or is that? Yeah, Diamondback. Wow, weird. He uses his tech, and they say that it's based on the former Iron Man villain. Oh wow, why am I brain farting now? That's really bad. Anyway, but it refers back to other tech. So the idea is other tech being around, and the fact that it was custom made. Does that mean that was made by the Tinkerer? Could we get, because the guy that played the Tinkerer,
did he buy it from the Vulture and his team?
Exactly.
Right.
We could Hammer, Justin Hammer.
Gotcha.
It was Hammer tech. So the idea is Justin Hammer still around after his failed thing in Iron Man 2, or could this be Hammer tech that was stolen and developed by the Tinkerer or something? Just something, some extra connectivity that doesn't just go one way. It feels like the TV shows and the movies, it's a one-way relationship. The TV shows pick off the movies.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have seen it go the other way.
Yeah.
But the Captain America little guest appearances were great.
Those were hysterical.
The idea of the extra spider suit at the end, which I thought personally was ugly and there just to sell more toys.
Absolutely.
It looked like a weird combination of the Iron Spider costume, one of the Spider Armor costumes, and some people said it looked kind of like the Miles Morales Spider-Man thing. But yeah, let me see. Let me scroll through my notes here and see if there's anything else. Fights were fine. Time, nope. Beyond that, I just have a big list of Easter eggs. I know we didn't super pick it apart, but we're kind of starting to get there on time. Is there anything else that was huge in this movie that you wanted to make sure we talked about?
Oh, goodness. I think it is pretty strange that they talked about selling the Avengers movie. And granted, that was a plot point for the very end. Selling the Avengers Tower, yes. That was a plot point for the end. However, why? I would assume they're probably going to answer that in a later movie.
Infinity War, I assume.
Will that be a big plot point or not?
Right.
That was a big question of mine. Let me think. What else?
Yeah, I mean, I thought for sort of an interim movie, because we have this and Black Panther and Thor Ragnarok, and then we get to Infinity War. I think Ragnarok is going to be the movie that sets up Infinity War. I think this and Black Panther are going to serve as sort of these standalone movies. But we know Bucky Barnes, because he's in Wakanda as of the end of Civil War, that these movies are going to... It's filling in the gap, because they didn't know they were going to get Spider-Man, as far as I'm aware. I feel like it was announced fairly close to Civil War production happening. And then they're like, well, then obviously we got to shove a standalone Spider-Man movie in the schedule somewhere. But they used it to great effect in having all of these little things. And we'll talk a little bit about that in our Easter eggs.
Sure. Yeah.
But in that sense, I thought it was successful.
Yeah, I agree.
That was me talking to give you time to think if there was anything else in there.
No, I'm coming up blank.
You did that thing that nobody else on the show does, and I think you actually listened to me when I was saying words where Liam is planning his next thing. He's not actually listening to me.
Say.
Yeah, exactly.
No, and I'm often that way too, but you cover a lot of the bases much more thoroughly than I often do when it comes to these movies. So
because we had the other classmates, we had the character we found out at the very end was MJ, but not Mary Jane Watson, confirmed by Kevin Feige, unless they're just blowing smoke. Right. The idea of maybe she'll end up dating Peter in a later movie because they kind of seem, but it's not Mary Jane Watson.
Yeah, because they let that. I believe that's the character being played by Zendaya.
Yes.
But they let her kind of give Peter a look like, okay, so Liz is out of the scene now because she moved to Oregon or wherever they moved to. And all of a sudden there's like that one moment where her eyes kind of follow him as he leaves and goes and catches up with Happy,
Well, they had the banter. It's the bantering relationship that everybody always looks at and says, oh, well, they need to be together.
Yeah, and she did a great job with the character. The character was well written. The character was pretty funny.
Yeah.
It did a lot of cliche stuff, kind of social justice warrior, and I feel like people who really are trying to be social justice warrior would be like, that wasn't okay, but I'm not one, so I don't really know. But I think it was a good character. I thought it was pretty neat how it flowed from she was just someone on the side to she could really be someone up front and kind of more important in the plot later on. So
yeah, and I think that's an important thing, just what you're saying about social justice warriors, just because we talked about this a little bit as well of Spider-Man getting the suit, because it was a thing I kind of wanted to complain about, was he says, I'm nothing without this suit. He's had it for 6 months, but it's already the most important thing to him in his life. Just like take a teenager, give him an Xbox 360 or whatever, Xbox One, I guess. I'm old now.
Or whatever the newest thing is out there.
Exactly. And it's the most important thing. Take away a kid's cell phone. That's their life. That's everything. That suit is his life. But this, just in young people, and I think it's always been, it's just more pronounced now because we have social media, so they're able to inspire one another to do more, or to at least be more outspoken, even if it's just on social media. But this idea of wanting to do more, wanting to help, because he's like, I just feel like I can do more. I just think there's more. And then he realizes
there wasn't really a lot of focus to that. He just wanted to do more, but he didn't know how to harness it.
Right. That's so true of the younger generation right now. Is they have this drive and this strength and this passion, but it's figuring out how to do it and how to make it the most effective. And I think it was really nice that the lesson at the end, not to disparage young people at all, but that the lesson at the end was, it's okay to start small. It's okay you don't need to immediately be an Avenger. It's good enough just to help your neighborhood. Do everything you can there locally. There's still time.
Absolutely.
And I love that message. I love that, and again, they don't shove it in your face. This is what I'm reading into the film. I could be totally wrong about what the message was supposed to be, but it was very much one of humility in the end, one way or the other. That we know for sure.
It kind of embarrasses Iron Man, but not really.
Yes, exactly.
Because Tony Stark is kind of acting like that was planned. Like, that was a test, right? Yep, you passed. Passed.
And we got Gwyneth Paltrow back.
Yes,
as well. Did. And it seems like, because they were going to have a big press release to say, here's Spider-Man, here's his new armor.
Right.
He's part of the Avengers now. Instead he's just going to propose to her out there just because, okay, I guess I got to do this. And then Happy saying, I've had this ring for 8 years. Which I guess makes sense if we look at the time, but it would have to be Iron Man in 2008 versus 2016. Yeah. Maybe it was a writer just not looking at the timeline right.
Oh, it could be.
Where Happy says, I've had this ring for 8 years. That would harken back to the first Iron Man movie. Sort of. Because they kind of try and be consistent. But yes, it's a great movie.
It just has it randomly, not even in a box, just in his pocket.
Yeah. So before we jump into Easter eggs, then, sort of the last thought, what would you want to see in a Spider-Man 2? I know I'm dropping that on you.
What would I want to see? Well, I wouldn't mind having a moment where Michael Keaton comes back, even if he doesn't have anything else to do with, because that was definitely my favorite character for this movie, was that whole, how that was written, everything about it. Let's see a little bit of the Vulture, even if he's still in prison. He's in audience with another group or whatever they may be. And granted, I apologize to the audience. I'm not as connected to the comic books as I should be, and
No,
you can
it's
tell.
fine. There's not
you
a
can
should
absolutely
be. It's
tell
what you're into.
But,
yeah.
But it will be neat to see that. Otherwise, I'm really curious because in order for it to be a good movie nowadays, and for movies to break out of the epidemic of passable movies that we're kind of in often, it would need to have a whole new villain.
Right.
And granted, something from the comics or not, but it would need to be have a whole new villain. So we can't continue with the same storyline with the same villain, even though I think it's a great character. We can't do that, but it would be neat to at least see him for a moment, and even if that was a major plot point. So,
yeah, no, I would agree. I'd like to see him return, even if it's in that other aspect. Yep. I would assume the Tinker would return because he's still out there. So that would be cool, of seeing him almost turning into not the super genius, because I don't think that's going to be the character he's supposed to be. He's not going to be the mastermind. I hope he's not. He's the other person we go to, kind of like the Gladiator in the Daredevil series is the guy who builds a Daredevil suit for him. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but that's fine.
Nope. It's in my watch list. I haven't hit play yet. So.
Okay. But yeah, I just think more of the same, which I know is what everybody complains about with sequels, but when it comes to this Spider-Man, I would love to stick around in this world for a while. In this Spider-Man's world, I'm excited to see what happens next. And obviously we have him in Infinity War, and there's a question of who's going to stick around, because we know there's multiple Spider-Man movies coming, because he signed however many film contract. But there's some Easter eggs which suggest that maybe he could still be replaced at some point. And with that,
that's interesting.
Let's get into our Easter eggs. I'm going to go through these as fast as possible because I know we're running late on time. First up, let's talk damage control. So the Department of Damage Control, those are the people that come in and take over the salvage operation. This was a cult favorite comic book in the 80s, maybe early 90s. The Comics Code Authority was still around on the cover. But it is about the people that go in and clean up after the superhero fights. In the comics, it's a company, not a department of the government. It's an actual company started by Tony Stark and Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, who's a Daredevil villain, and also very often a Spider-Man villain because he is the Kingpin of crime in New York City. So it was a very interesting thing where Tony Stark and Wilson Fisk actually put their money together in order to help clean up New York after all of these superhero fights. What's interesting is there was supposed to be a damage control television show. It was in development in 2015 at ABC, and then it fell apart. It was basically a counterpart to what Powerless was, which is a comedy sitcom sort of thing about a group of people that are normal that have to figure out a way to live and work in a world of superheroes. Now we're going to get into some of these are things I did not notice. First, there is a mural. Peter Parker goes to a tech high school. So everybody in that school are like geniuses or smart kids, which is why Flash Thompson, who has always been the bully, and when Peter Parker is in high school, isn't the jock who's trying to beat him up in the hallway. He's just another kid who's an academic.
Trying to jive him all the time.
Yeah, decathlon character. So in this science high school, there's murals and pictures of scientists all over the place, including a mural that has Dr. Erskine and Howard Stark, who are the two people that work together to create Captain America. Dr. Erskine is the guy who invented the super soldier formula that gives Captain America his abilities. And then I guess in the classroom, there's a picture of Bruce Banner along with like Einstein and other scientists on the wall, which I thought was kind of neat. The school itself was established in 1962, the same year Spider-Man came out. Classmates, and I pointed some of these out to you. Betty Brant, who was the girl on TV, as well as Jason Iannello, who was her co-host, were both characters in the early Spider-Man comics. Betty Brant worked the desk and then was a reporter, sometime love interest of Peter Parker. Jason Iannello was one of Flash Thompson's friends who also beat up on Peter Parker in high school. There was also another guy in their class named Abe, who might be, and this is maybe too deep cuts, but might be Abe Brown, aka Black Tiger, who was a member of the Sons of the Tiger. It was a Chinese American man, a Caucasian man, and an African American man, and they split pieces of this tiger amulet and were the Sons of the Tiger kung fu guys in the 70s. And then eventually they all quit. The amulet was put together, and a character known as the White Tiger used it. This is the same amulet used by the female White Tiger character in the animated Spider-Man series. I know I'm going crazy deep cuts here, but somebody said this Abe might be Abe Brown, a.k.a. Black Tiger. So there's a White Tiger connection for those of you that watched the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon. Liz, the character of Liz, is a drawback from the character Liz Allen. So not Toombs, because it's Adrian Toombs, is it? So they never really say her last name. Maybe it is still Allen. But Liz Allen was one of Peter Parker's best friends in high school, was not really a love interest of Peter's, but eventually marries Harry Osborn, the second Green Goblin, son of the first Green Goblin. And they have a son together in the comics. Liz's friend Cindy may be a reference to Cindy Moon, a.k.a. Silk, and this is a recent character that they retconned as being around this entire time, who is another member of Peter's class who was also bitten by the spider, also got Spider-Man-like powers, and is now a superheroine called Silk, but there's something about her origin where she stayed hidden for years because of her powers and was on the run or something of that sort. Okay. So, but the idea that there's a character named Cindy means maybe down the line we might run into Silk, which is basically a female Spider-Man. And there's been multiple Spider-Women and a Spider-Girl and other Arachnid or something. There was another female sort of Spider-Man character out there. And then Spider-Gwen and all these other... But this was somebody who actually just has exactly Spider-Man's powers. The teacher is played by a guy who also played a lab technician in The Incredible Hulk. So the theory is this lab technician at this university may have become Peter Parker's science teacher. The principal. Remember when I was talking, one of the big things in this movie is clearly diversity. Historically, white characters are now people of color. And I hope nobody minds, because it didn't bother me one bit. It was
looks
fine.
so much like a normal inner city school, or like even a normal suburbia school. I mean, having grown up and lived around Chicago for most of my teenage years, the whole high school looked like I was used to.
Where I had to point out to you, like, this is a lot... Yeah, there are a lot more people of color in this than
it didn't even
you normally
dawn on me,
see
I'm
in
like,
the superhero movie.
That's normal.
So, but I mentioned that the principal had a photo... and said the principal is Asian American and a veteran because they have the medals and everything. I was wrong.
Oh.
Those were photos of... It's the same actor. So here's the weird... Because I saw the one photo, and it looked like there was the sort of the headshot of the veteran, and then a picture of men standing together. And I was like, that kind of reminds me of sort of the photo from, like, Wonder Woman of everybody standing together, which is sort of the same as, like, the photo of the Howling Commandos from Captain America. You know, I was thinking World War II, but that wouldn't make sense for this character. They wouldn't know... Captain America. Supposedly that principal is the grandson of a character from the first Captain America movie who who was one of the Howling Commandos that fought alongside Captain America in World War II.
That's amazing. Okay.
But both characters are played by the same actor. But it's him as in World War II that those photos were. So it's again all these weird little connections.
It's almost like there was a team at Marvel Studios that was actually working on all of these Easter eggs.
Just Easter eggs. Oh, yeah.
No, this is a continuity thing. We need this. But why? We'll tell you later.
Exactly. And I think some of those are maybe why some directors are like, you got to give me more control here. You can't tell me I need to have all of these hints and characters in here because you're making the movie more dense.
And the movie was very dense.
And it was a very dense film. Yeah. And then there's things that are gratuitous. Like, all right, so the scene where he steals the car. I would have much rather he steal the car, drive it like 10 feet, crash, and then just use his webs and leave that way from there. Just web out of the car. Yeah. Would have been amazing. Instead, we get a car chase scene kind of with Spider-Man, which was weird, and clearly just there to be so that they could have a sponsorship with that car company, I feel.
Yeah,
that's the only thing that makes sense to me. Otherwise, that whole thing seemed very out of place. Because when he gets into the city, unless it's the idea of maybe he's not that good at web swinging yet. Maybe he doesn't know really how to move quick. So I don't know, but that felt sort of stuffed in there as not an Easter egg, but a thing. Ned, we assume this is supposed to be Ned Leeds, who is a friend of Spider-Man. In the comics, he is a Daily Bugle reporter who eventually marries Betty Brant, and for a time was the villain known as the Hobgoblin. However, this character tends to look and act more like, and I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, Ganke, Ganke, who is the best friend of Miles Morales, who is the second Spider-Man in the Ultimate Comics and is now in the regular. There's 2 Spider-Men right now. And he is the, mixed race, black, Hispanic Spider-Man, Miles Morales. So his best friend is basically where they took Ned from in this movie. Okay. Donald Glover's character. There was talk forever of if they do a Spider-Man movie, Donald Glover wants to play Miles Morales, and have a Spider-Man of color on the screen because that would be huge and important and cool. Well, his character is named Aaron Davis, a.k.a., and I think it apparently said it when they looked up his record, a.k.a. the Prowler, right, who is an old Spider-Man villain, but is also in Ultimate Comics Spider-Man #1, the first issue of the Miles Morales Spider-Man, because he is Miles Morales' uncle. And in this movie, Aaron Davis says, I got a nephew who lives in this area. That is a direct reference to Miles Morales, the second Spider-Man. His license plate is UCSM01, as in Ultimate Comics Spider-Man issue #1.
Oh, that's crazy.
The appearance of that character. There is also a license plate on the ferry that is SM20563, May 1963, Amazing Spider-Man #2, the debut of the Vulture and the Tinkerer.
Wow.
This is how deep cuts they get on some of these.
Oh, my goodness.
These are things I didn't notice.
Did they ever answer why there was a kid in some sort of like monster costume that would be running out of frame every couple frames whenever you're in the school and they cut to a frame out in the hallway, there'd be a kid
guy
running
that runs.
to the right.
I noticed that as well.
I couldn't figure out what that was about.
It was somebody in a tiger costume, I think. I think it was just supposed to be a
like a relief.
Either a comic relief or it was just the school mascot because it's homecoming week.
Gotcha.
So I think it was just supposed to be a joke of that running by, or there's something I'm missing.
Right.
As far as our villains, the Vulture, the Tinkerer, who makes the weapons, the Shocker, the second guy who was the Shocker, Herman Schultz, is the character in the comics who's actually the Shocker. We get kind of a tribute to his costume in the yellow quilted arm bands. That's the Shocker's costume. Looks very warm, but it's brown and yellow quilted sort of design as the Shocker's outfit is supposed to insulate him from the shocks that he sends out as beams in the comic books. We already talked about Mac Gargan, the Scorpion. In the comics, he's also Venom, actually, for a short period of time. We talked about the Amazing Spider-Man sequence from Amazing Spider-Man 33, where he's fallen under the rubble. The Avengers scene where or the Avengers, finger quotes Avengers, where the people robbing the ATM are in Avengers masks. That is from an issue of Spider-Man. One of the other girls in the high school, there's a girl with silver hair. There's a theory that might be Felicia Hardy, a.k.a. Black Cat. So maybe they're doing that X-Men thing where whenever they showed a scene of Xavier's mansion, every single one of those kids was a reference to an X-Men character. So it'd be, that kid ran across water. Is that Quicksilver? Or whatever. So there's a lot of those in this one. We mentioned the Sinister Six. There's teases for other stuff we know we're going to see in Avengers. They drop a hint of Cap's new shield or the shield that Tony was working on. We don't know, was this a shield that was being worked on before Civil War? Is this a shield for a new Captain America, since Captain America leaves the shield behind at the end of Civil War? Does that mean Iron Man is making it for who he thinks should be the new Captain America? Is it the energy shield, which was stupid, but was a shield that Captain America uses for a time? That's basically a round lightsaber.
Oh.
For all intents and purposes.
Wow.
It's an energy shield that he always has with him. And then they talk about Thor's belt, and he can't pronounce it. You remember that? So I'm going to attempt Meganjord, or Meganjord. There's some accents on that one, which they basically call the power belt. And it's a belt that Thor wears, or he gets at one point in the comics, that multiplies his already incredible strength. And I actually looked up the panel where he gets it in the comic, and he's knocked out, and these basically angels from Asgard come down and give him this belt to get him back on his feet. And there's an editor's note, which you don't see a lot in comics anymore, where somebody will say something and there'll just be a little asterisk, and then down in the corner an editor will say, this is referencing, Iron Man issues 335 through 336. And it actually says, Thor actually had this belt in Norse mythology. Look it up. Kind of thing. So yes, the actual Thor mythology has a mystical belt that gives him additional strength. But it's not anything we've seen in the movies thus far. We talked about how MJ is not Mary Jane Watson. It's just another character named MJ. We'll see. I think that might be a little bit of smoke being blown at us. Yep. Or maybe they just thought it would be fun to have a character named MJ because it's a Spider-Man movie. Okay. Here's a weird one. Apparently the room at the beginning of the movie where Toomes and his team, before he's the Vulture, are working on the giant space worm thing, and they're taking everything apart. Apparently, that is the same room where in the Avengers movie, Thor and Hulk take down one of them, and then Hulk sucker punches Thor. So apparently that is the worm that they're working on.
Gotcha. I
don't know why, but somebody claims that the side of the building torn apart is the exact same, or it has the same view out the back. The gauntlet that the Shocker uses, they mention Lagos. That is the location in the beginning of Civil War where Captain America is fighting against Crossbone, and he has those gauntlets that make him punch really hard. Mm-hmm. Last one that I have here, I'm sure there's others that even the internet hasn't found yet. The last bit there is the voice of Spider-Man's suit, which I guess we really didn't get into.
Right. Karen.
I don't know that we needed that. I don't know we needed the AI. I don't know that it needed a name. I
agree with that too. I don't know that the suit needed the AI.
No. I think it fit in the MCU of Tony Stark gives you a thing. Mm-hmm. It is way overdone. There is, he's dealing with the suit a lot of the movie because it's doing things he doesn't want it to do because there's too much going on.
I don't know if that was necessary. I think that added to the density of the movie, and it wasn't necessary.
I think it would have been good enough where, oh, wow, there's glider wings, and then the rest should have been like advanced web shooters. Mm-hmm. I understand that the suit would have things, but again, it's the Tony Stark gives you a thing. It's going to have more everything in it than you will ever need.
Yeah, and it took me at surprise, and perhaps because I haven't read the comics, how much of Tony Stark was, how much he was in this movie, and how much Spider-Man essentially needed him for all of that tech and
right, because we talked about it afterwards. Obviously, that's not the case in the comics. At one point in time, there is what they call the Iron Spider outfit that Tony Stark makes for Peter Parker during the first Civil War comic book storyline. But no, generally they don't really associate much. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's storylines they have together, but in general, their characters don't really run in the same circles in the Marvel universe.
They don't interact as much.
No. So that's very much just because Iron Man is sort of the center of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Right. And in this case, he's such a father figure to Spider-Man.
Right.
Versus there was an uncle before in other storylines. So that was different too.
Right. But our last Easter egg is the voice of the suit, named Karen, is Jennifer Connelly, which is interesting for two reasons. One, she plays, the wife or future wife of the Incredible Hulk in the non-MCU version of the Hulk, in Ang Lee's Hulk.
Okay.
But what's interesting is Jennifer Connelly is the voice of Spider-Man's suit. Her husband is Paul Bettany, who plays the Vision, who was the voice of Jarvis, who was the voice of Iron Man's suit.
Right.
So you have voice of Iron Man's suit, and his wife is the voice of Spider-Man's suit. And I just thought it's just this fun. It doesn't mean anything.
Sure.
But otherwise, I don't know why it was Jennifer Connelly, why that was the choice.
Mm-hmm.
Except that that's kind of fun,
Yeah.
And that's it. Those are my Easter eggs. So that took a really long time, but so here's the question. As a non-comic book fan, as somebody who I don't even think has seen all of the Marvel movies, is that correct? Or have you seen all of them?
I've missed one.
Okay.
One, like the one right before
like maybe
Age
Thor
of
2.
Ultron. I missed the
because there was Thor 2 and Iron Man 3 and the second Captain America.
What was the second Captain America?
The Winter Soldier.
I missed that one. That's the one.
That's a good one. Well, we got to watch that at some point.
Uh-huh.
So you're not a comic book fan, but there's all these Easter egg things.
Mm-hmm.
Does listening to me roll off a massive list of Easter eggs make you enjoy the movie more, or is it to you
absolutely.
Unnecessary?
And I guess I should addend what you just said. I am a fan of comics and comic books. I just haven't taken the time to read. So I would be absolutely a fan of reading every single issue. I haven't had time.
No.
So,
well, it's just, you're learning real world things.
Well,
you learn how to repair things and save people thousands of dollars by telling them how to fix things they own. While I can tell you
of non-alien tech.
Yeah. While I can tell you why Spider-Man's web shooters don't go off every time he makes a fist.
Oh yeah, I have no idea.
He has to double tap.
Oh.
In order to shoot webs. I might have a thing. So there was a comic. Not even really a comic. It was an encyclopedia. It was the official handbook of the Marvel Universe. And in it, writers and artists attempt to give real-world explanations for things. There's a diagram of how web shooters work in this thing. I wonder if that would be
Just
something you'd be interested to see.
There's a technical manual of how the entire Starship Enterprise works.
Yes.
Like Class D. And it's the most detailed fan book I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And they give all these reasons why the technology could work. And here's how the science would work and all of this. Yeah, so I respect that,
Yeah, exactly.
Exists,
so those things exist, but I never know if all of the Easter egg things. Like I know they're neat, and I always try and do explainer things ahead of time. Like you might see this character, and if you do, you can say, I get that, and it's just that little added note.
Sure.
Like when people talk about kyber crystals in the Star Wars.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, that's what's in the lightsaber.
Right.
I don't know that unless I hear it from somebody else's podcast or something.
And it took Rogue One for me to know that too. So
yeah. But those type of things. Well, that is it then, I guess, unless there was any final thoughts on Spider-Man you wanted to share.
Nope. I'm just curious to find out when the next iteration comes out. So
the next movie that's going to hit, I think, is going to be Thor Ragnarok.
Right.
It says our live video was interrupted. I'm guessing maybe the battery died on my phone. Oh, well. Well, if you were watching that on Facebook Live, I hope you had a good time. Anyway, it doesn't matter because we're at the end here. So thank you very much for joining us. Would you like people to have a way to find you?
Sure. Yeah.
On
absolutely.
Twitter or Facebook or...
Goodness. Oh, well, that means I actually have to have something set up. So I'll get Twitter set up and we can.
Okay, you could set up a Twitter. Otherwise, I can. If you want people to find you on Facebook, I can share a link to your Facebook page.
Okay.
Because they'll see whatever you have available out there, unless you're completely cloaked.
I'm fairly cloaked.
Okay.
So
all right. Well, however it works, or if you want to get a message to Ryan, you can always send it to me.
Sure.
You can find us on Twitter at ComicBoxCast. You can find me personally on Twitter at Knowby. That's KNOWBY. You can email us at thecomicboxpodcast@gmail.com. Like I just said, we were running a Facebook Live video while we were doing this, just as a fun behind the scenes. So if you want to see the hideous chuds that we are, you're welcome to go and seek out the Geek to Geek podcast network on Facebook. Just search Geek to Geekcast on Facebook. But now I want to talk to you guys. I want to know what you guys thought of this movie. We have more in-depth conversations on our subreddit, which is reddit.com/r/Geek2Geekcast. I will start a thread there posting this episode. Comment away. I look forward to joining you guys in a conversation over there. Do you Reddit?
I do, yes.
Well, there you go.
I need to set up a handle.
Okay.
But I'm currently read-only, if you will.
Okay. So you can set up a Ryan Sandyman or Pecan Sandyman.
The Tinkerer. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
no.
Reddit handle. All right, well, that is it. As always, like, subscribe, share this podcast with your friends, And we will see you next time with a pointing at you, forcing you to do it. Da-da-da-da-do.
Wow.
Da-da-da-da-do-do. The Comic Box doing some Spider-Man reviews. Da-da-da-da-do-da-da-da-da-da-da.